David Brooks stands before the courtroom with the kind of silence that speaks louder than any outcry. His clothes are worn, his hands trembling, but his posture still carries the shadow of the soldier he once was. Every wrinkle on his face feels like a scar left by life itself. And today, he's here not as a defendant, but as a broken man begging the system to hear the truth. Judge Caprio studies him with soft, searching eyes that have seen thousands of cases, but still know how to feel. There's something about David, something fragile yet unyielding, that makes the judge lean forward. But nobody in the room is prepared for the man sitting on the other side of this case. Ethan Walker, son of the city's police chief. A young man with a polished appearance, a raised chin, and a confidence that borders on arrogance. He watches David like someone who's certain that money, influence, and his last name will protect him from consequences. The charge? Assaulting a homeless veteran. The allegations sound impossible to anyone who believes the system is fair. A respected officer's son attacking a man who once risked his life for the country? But David's trembling voice tells a different story. He clutches an old, battered military dog tag, not as evidence, but as a reminder of the life he lost long before this courtroom moment. He insists he didn't provoke, didn't threaten, didn't fight back. He just needed help, and instead he got violence. As Judge Caprio looks between David's worn eyes and Ethan's expressionless face, a tension settles over the courtroom. This isn't just another case. This is a fight between truth and privilege, pain and power, a forgotten soldier and a protected son. Judge Caprio takes a breath, and the entire room waits for the first question that will unravel everything. Judge Caprio adjusts his glasses, but it's not because he can't see. It's because he's trying to understand the story behind the pain written across David Brooks' face. The courtroom feels colder suddenly, as if the walls themselves sense something is wrong, something unspoken. David stands stiff, his shoulders slightly hunched as though he's carrying years of invisible weight. His voice is soft, almost apologetic. Even when he's asked to state his name, he hesitates, as if speaking out loud might shatter whatever fragile strength he has left. David Brooks, Your Honor." Caprio nods gently, recognizing the type of silence a broken man uses to protect himself. On the other side, Ethan Walker looks almost bored. His suit is crisp, his hair perfectly combed, and his attorney whispers strategy to him as if this entire hearing is nothing but a small inconvenience. Ethan avoids eye contact with David, but not with the cameras. He sits straighter whenever he senses the lens pointing his way. Privilege doesn't always speak, but always shows. Caprio begins with the simplest question. "Mr. Brooks, what brought you here today?" And that's when David swallows hard, gripping the edge of the podium as though it's the only thing keeping him standing. He explains how he's been living in a small abandoned alley near the old train station. No family, no steady job, just odd work and long nights struggling to stay warm. He returned from service years ago, carrying things nobody could see, memories that don't make noise but never stop screaming. That night, he wasn't asking for trouble. He was asking for food. A local diner where Ethan and his friends were hanging out. David only stepped inside because he hadn't eaten in 2 days. He quietly asked the cashier if there were leftovers they planned to throw away. What happened next is where the story splits into two versions. Ethan's version, and the truth David is finally brave enough to tell. David says Ethan mocked him first, called him trash, a fake veteran, someone stealing sympathy. David didn't argue. He just wanted to leave with whatever scraps the diner could spare. But when he turned around, Ethan shoved him, hard enough to knock him into a table. David didn't fight back. He raised his hands and tried to leave. That's when Ethan grabbed him again, this time more aggressively. David didn't see the punch coming. He only remembers the floor rushing toward him and the sound of someone laughing. In the courtroom, Ethan finally shifts in his chair, jaw tightening, eyes flicking toward his attorney for reassurance. Caprio watches everything, every twitch, every breath, every flicker of guilt or arrogance. Then he asks the question that changes the air instantly. "Mr. Brooks, Why didn't you file a complaint that night? Because, Your Honor, they wouldn't believe someone like me against someone like him. A small murmur spreads across the room. And for the first time, Ethan's confident posture falters. The courtroom feels completely different now. What started as a simple hearing has turned into something heavier, something people can't look away from. Even the officers at the back of the room stop shifting and stand still, waiting to see where this story goes. Judge Caprio leans back slowly, fingers pressed together, studying David as if every detail matters, even the ones David is too afraid to say out loud. Mr. Brooks, the judge says softly, I want you to take your time and tell us exactly what happened. David nods, though the movement is barely visible. His fingers tremble around the edge of the podium, not from fear of the courtroom, but from the memories clawing their way to the surface. He begins again. David explains how hunger had pushed him into the diner that night. Not a craving, not a choice. Hunger that makes your knees shake. Hunger that makes you dizzy. Hunger that makes you swallow your pride, because staying alive becomes more important than dignity. He didn't go inside to cause trouble. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg for money. He simply asked if the extra food that will be thrown away, could be spared. The cashier was kind. She was ready to help. But Ethan wasn't. Ethan Walker was sitting with two friends, laughing, showing videos on his phone, filling the room with the careless energy of someone who has never been told no. David continues describing that moment when Ethan turned around, slow, amused, like he had discovered entertainment. He looked at me, David says, like I wasn't even human. Ethan shifts uncomfortably, but stays silent. David explains how Ethan mocked him, called him names, accused him of pretending to be a veteran for attention, told him he smelled like the streets. Each insult delivered loud enough that the entire diner fell quiet. Judge Caprio watches Ethan now, not David. When David reached the part where Ethan pushed him, the judge interrupts gently. Mr. Brooks, did you engage in any physical contact before that moment? David shakes his head with certainty. No, Your Honor. I didn't touch him. I was trying to leave. David then describes falling into the table, hearing the crash of dishes and the sudden laughter that erupted, sharp, cruel, echoing. And that's when the punch landed. Not a small push, not a defensive reaction, a deliberate punch from a young man who knew the world would protect him. David's voice begins to shake, not because of pain, but because telling this story out loud is like ripping open a wound he's kept stitched together for years. He explains how he didn't fight back, how he curled his arms in front of his face because he didn't want to hurt anyone and didn't want to go to jail, how he tried to get out the door but was grabbed again. Caprio closes his eyes for a moment, steadying his own emotions. When he opens them, he glances at Ethan. Mr. Walker, the judge says, you will have a chance to respond. But right now, I need Mr. Brooks to continue. David nods again, gathering strength. He tells the court how an older man, another customer, finally stepped in. How he pulled Ethan back and shouted at him to stop. How Ethan's friends immediately claimed, he attacked us first, even though David hadn't lifted a hand. David then says something that tightens the entire room. I thought, if I stayed quiet, maybe they'd let me go. He wasn't afraid of Ethan. He was afraid of being blamed. Then comes the detail that turns the courtroom ice cold. David explains that the police arrived, and the first person they walked toward wasn't Ethan. It was him, a man covered in bruises, bleeding from his lip, shaking with exhaustion, yet automatically treated as the problem. Caprio's jaw tightens. This is the part he understands too well. How society sometimes cracks along predictable lines. Go on, the judge says quietly. David continues. He describes standing outside the diner, leaning against the wall, stomach growling, head spinning, while Ethan confidently told his version of the story. His friends backed him up instantly, each lie supporting the next. He said, I started it, David whispers. He said, I tried to steal from him. The courtroom ripples with discomfort. Even the people in the back shift angrily. David wipes his eyes quickly, embarrassed. I didn't want to argue, Your Honor. I just asked the officer if I could go. I told him I didn't want trouble. And he said if I didn't leave immediately, I would be taken in. Caprio feels the frustration rise inside him, but he remains composed. He knows reacting too quickly will shut David down. So he asks calmly, "And you left?" David nods. "I walked until my legs hurt, and when I finally sat down, I realized I never even got the food I came for." It's quiet for several seconds. Not courtroom quiet, human quiet. The kind that happens when everyone in the room suddenly understands a story is bigger than they thought. Then comes the shift. Caprio turns slightly toward Ethan. "Mr. Walker, you've heard everything said today. You may respond." Ethan's attorney rises immediately. "Your Honor, my client disputes this version of events." Caprio lifts one hand. He can speak for himself right now. "I will hear from counsel afterward." The attorney hesitates but sits. Everyone watches Ethan. He looks around the room, realizing something he didn't expect. Nobody is on his side right now. Not even the silent audience. He clears his throat, trying to steady his voice. "Your Honor, with respect, this is exaggerated." Caprio doesn't blink. "Go on." Ethan continues. "He came in asking for food like he owned the place. He was aggressive. He kept staring at us. I felt uncomfortable. I asked him to leave, respectfully." David keeps his head down, but a small flinch shows how deeply the lie cuts. Caprio leans forward slightly. "Did you put your hands on Mr. Brooks?" Ethan hesitates, a flicker, a tiny crack in his confidence. I may have pushed him when he got too close." Caprio's voice sharpens just a little. And the punch. Ethan's jaw tightens. "He grabbed my shirt, Your Honor. I defended myself." David looks up, eyes wide. "I never." Caprio gently raises a hand to pause him. "Mr. Walker," the judge says calmly, "I need you to think carefully. Multiple witnesses have been interviewed. Several statements have already been submitted. You're under oath. Is this truly your version of events?" Ethan swallows. His attorney touches his arm, signaling him to stop talking. But it's too late. The judge has already read the fear. Not fear of truth, fear of consequences. Caprio sits back, silent for a moment. Then he asks, "Mr. Brooks, do you have anything else you want to tell this court before we proceed?" David hesitates. Then something inside him cracks open. "Yes, Your Honor. There's something I didn't say." Everyone leans in. David breathes deeply, voice trembling. "When he pushed me the second time, he said something that hurt worse than the punch." Caprio nods slowly. "What did he say?" David's voice breaks. "He told me that people like me don't belong anywhere. Not in the diner, not in the city, not in the world." A gasp spreads across the room. Even Ethan's attorney stops writing. Caprio's expression shifts. Not anger, not shock, just a deep, quiet sadness. He speaks softly, but every word is heavy. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for your honesty." Then he turns to Ethan, and the tone changes completely. "Mr. Walker, we're not done. The conflict has only begun." The courtroom is silent. Not tense, heavy. A silence thick enough to feel in the chest, like the whole room is holding its breath. Judge Caprio adjusts his glasses slowly. He doesn't look at anyone. Not Ethan. Not the attorneys. Not even David. He's thinking. And when Caprio thinks this long, everyone knows something powerful is coming. Finally, he speaks, quiet, measured, but with a weight that fills the room. "Mr. Brooks, I want you to lift your head for me." David hesitates, then looks up. His eyes are tired, swollen, but honest. Caprio gives him a small, warm nod. "You did not deserve what happened to you." David exhales shakily, the kind of breath people release when someone finally says the truth they've been afraid to believe. Then Caprio turns his chair very slowly toward Ethan. The entire room shifts with him. He looks at the young man, really looks, and Ethan drops his gaze instantly, suddenly unable to hold eye contact with the man whose moral gravity fills the courtroom. Caprio's voice remains calm, but there's a sharper edge now, like a storm forming behind gentleness. "Mr. Walker, do you understand the weight of your actions?" Ethan swallows. "Your Honor, Caprio raises one hand, soft but firm. "I'm not asking for excuses. I'm asking if you understand." Ethan opens his mouth again and closes it. He knows the judge can see straight through him. Caprio shifts forward, elbows on the bench. His tone deepens. You are the son of a police chief, a young man who has grown up protected, supported, shielded from consequences. And yet, he pauses. His eyes scan Ethan's face. You use that privilege not to lift someone up, but to push a broken man further down. Ethan's face flushes. Caprio continues, his voice carrying a controlled intensity that vibrates across the courtroom. A man who served his country. A man who was hungry. A man who asked for help. He turns briefly toward David, and instead of compassion, he was met with cruelty. David's eyes water, but he stays silent. Caprio looks back at Ethan. You didn't just throw a punch. He taps a finger gently on the bench. You try to remind him of his lowest place. Ethan blinks rapidly, overwhelmed. The judge's tone softens, not weakness, but disappointment. Tell me something, Mr. Walker. Why did you say those words? Ethan opens his mouth, but no explanation comes out. His attorney glances at him, clearly wanting to intervene, but Caprio is intentionally giving the young man space to force a reckoning. Ethan stares down, voice barely above a whisper. Your Honor, I don't know. I just said it. Caprio raises his eyebrows. You just said it? Ethan nods, ashamed. Caprio's voice grows even gentler and more devastating. Words like that don't come from nowhere, son. He taps his heart. They come from in here. Ethan looks up just for a second, and in that second, everyone sees it. The crack, the fracture, the moment the wall begins to break. Caprio sees it too, so he leans in further, lowering his voice as if speaking to Ethan alone. When you look at Mr. Brooks, what do you see? Ethan hesitates. This is the question he cannot hide behind. David watches him carefully, not with anger, but with pain. Finally, Ethan whispers, I saw someone beneath me. The courtroom lets out a collective breath, part shock, part sadness. David closes his eyes, the words hitting him like a second punch. Caprio leans back, sighing. Not angrily, not dramatically, but like a man carrying the weight of too many years witnessing the same kind of hurt. Mr. Walker, that is the exact reason why this moment matters. He waits until Ethan looks up again. Because today, you're going to learn that humanity does not have tears. Ethan's throat tightens. Caprio continues, voice steady, warm, parental. You hit a man who never raised his hands to you. You mocked a man who never mocked you. You humiliated a man who was simply trying to survive. David swallows hard. Caprio lifts one hand toward him. Mr. Brooks, would you mind telling us what the hardest part of that night was? David hesitates, then whispers. Not the punch, not the fall. It was realizing that someone looked at me and saw nothing. A trembling silence follows. Judge Caprio nods gently, then turns to Ethan again. Do you hear that? Ethan nods, eyes full. Caprio's voice softens. This is your turning point, son, not his. The room freezes. Caprio continues. I have seen hardened criminals show more humility than what you showed that night. But I've also seen young men make mistakes and rise from them. He studies Ethan's face, searching. So I'm giving you one chance, to tell this court the truth. Ethan's voice cracks. I heard him, Your Honor. I heard him because I thought I could. Caprio nods slowly, deeply, like he's been waiting for that exact sentence. Now we're getting somewhere. Ethan wipes his eyes. I am sorry. I'm really sorry. Caprio leans forward again. Don't apologize to me. He gestures softly to David. Apologize to the man you wounded. Ethan turns, not with arrogance now, but with fear and sincerity. Mr. Brooks, I am sorry. I shouldn't have touched you. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was acting like someone I'm not proud of. His voice breaks. I was wrong. David looks at him quietly, then nods. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Just acknowledgement. The first step toward healing. Caprio breathes in deeply, then gives his final line, the line that lifts the entire court into the true turning point. Good, because from this moment on, the story changes. Everyone feels it. The energy, the shift, the transformation. This is the moment where pain meets truth, and truth begins to open the door to justice. The courtroom feels different now. Not lighter, but clearer. as though everyone finally understands the gravity of what happened and what needs to happen next. Judge Frank Caprio sits back for a long moment, his hands folded thoughtfully. He looks at David first, not as a defendant, not as a case number, but as a human being who has suffered more than the world ever saw. Then he turns to Ethan, whose posture has completely collapsed. The arrogance is gone. The casual confidence is gone. What sits in its place is something new, accountability, and a painful awareness of the consequences of his actions. Caprio clears his throat softly. "Mr. Walker," he begins, "what you did cannot be erased. Words can be forgiven. Mistakes can be corrected. But harm must be understood before it can be healed." Ethan nods, unable to raise his eyes. Caprio continues. "You assaulted a man who never touched you. A man who came in search of food and walked out with injuries and humiliation." The judge lets that settle in the air. "But I will tell you something important. This courtroom is not just a place of punishment. It is a place of learning, of accountability, and, when possible, of redemption." Ethan looks up, hope and fear tangled in his expression. Caprio turns his attention briefly to David. "Mr. Brooks, you showed remarkable restraint that night. You showed dignity where none was shown to you. And I want to acknowledge your service, not just to this country, but to your own principles." David's eyes soften, touched by the recognition. Caprio returns to Ethan. "Here is my decision." The entire courtroom leans forward. "I am ordering you, Mr. Walker, to complete 100 hours of community service." Ethan exhales shakily, relieved but attentive. But Caprio isn't finished. Not just any service. "You will spend those hours working at the Providence Veterans Center, helping the very people your actions disrespected. You will listen to their stories. You will understand their struggles. And you will see the humanity you failed to see that night." Ethan nods quickly, almost gratefully. "Your Honor, I'll do it. I promise." Caprio's voice remains steady. "There will also be mandatory counseling sessions. Privilege is not an excuse, but unchecked anger becomes a danger to yourself and others." Ethan nods again, emotional. Then Caprio turns back to David. "Mr. Brooks, you deserve more than an apology. You deserve a path forward." David looks at him, unsure what that means. Caprio continues gently. "I'm referring your case to a local veteran support program. They will help you find temporary housing, job assistance, and counseling services. No veteran, no human being should ever feel as invisible as you did that night." David's lips tremble, gratitude washing over him. "Thank you, Your Honor." Caprio gives a soft smile. "You earned it, Mr. Brooks. All of it." He looks at both men now, one broken by life, the other humbled by consequence. Today is not about punishment. It is about recognition, responsibility, humanity, a pause. And today, humanity wins. With a firm strike of the gavel, the case is closed, not as a moment of judgment, but as a moment of transformation. David stands a little taller. Ethan walks away changed, and the courtroom breathes again, grateful for a justice system guided not only by law, but by compassion. The courtroom empties slowly, yet the weight of what happened lingers like a quiet echo. Two men walked in from different worlds and walked out changed in ways neither expected. David Brooks leaves with more than assistance. He leaves with dignity restored and the comforting knowledge that someone finally saw him. Someone cared. Someone fought for him. Ethan Walker leaves with consequences, yes, but also with a chance to grow into someone better than his worst moment. A chance to understand the world beyond privilege. A chance to rebuild himself with humility. And at the center of it all stood Judge Frank Caprio, steady, compassionate, unshaken. A man who reminded everyone watching that justice is not just about the law, it's about humanity. Moments like these are rare, but when they happen, they remind us that kindness doesn't make us weak, it makes us whole. If this story touched you, if it made you pause, if it reminded you that every person you meet carries a battle you can't see, then make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because every week, we bring you real stories of hope, redemption, and the power of compassion in the courtroom. Like the video, Share it with someone who needs a reminder of humanity. And join us for the next emotional journey. Until then, stay kind, stay hopeful, and we'll see you in the next story.